The pandemic has hit us hard, and healthcare workers are our first and last lines of defense. So while they're looking out for us, who's looking out for them? There has never been a more critical time to address the mental health of our healthcare community. This is Lift the Mask, Voices of Heroes in the Silent Pandemic. Join the Quell Foundation and Hartford Health's Dr. John Santopietro as we provide a podcast for healthcare workers discussing their psychological traumas associated with continual exposure to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Hello, my name is John Santopietro. I'm a psychiatrist and I am the physician-in-chief at the Behavioral Health Network of Hartford Healthcare, headquartered in Hartford, Connecticut. During the pandemic, I have been part of a team providing support to healthcare workers on the front lines, and I have a particular interest in making sure that their stories get told. The Quell Foundation has put together this podcast in order to lift up the voices of those on the front lines as a way of reaching those who are still out there in the hope that they will be inspired to reach out for the help and support that is there for them. While there's been a lot of reporting about the pandemic in the news and even about the front lines of healthcare, what's unique about this podcast is that you get to hear the stories from the people that lived it and actually are still living it. I would also encourage other leaders to listen into this podcast because there are many lessons and clues about what makes good leadership in a pandemic and a crisis. It is my pleasure to welcome you to Lift the Mask, Voices of Heroes in the Silent Pandemic. So, welcome, Caitlyn. Very, very thankful that you have joined the podcast. I know that you are somebody that has said that you think this is a powerful vehicle to get the stories out there, to lift up the voices of people on the front lines, and you are certainly somebody on the front lines. Do you want to just start by telling us a little bit about the kind of healthcare work you do, and then what was going on, when the pandemic hit?
So I've been an ER nurse for the past 10 years, 5 of which were spent as a traveling ER nurse. So I've worked all across the country in about 11 or 12 different facilities. I had just settled here in Oregon in January, just prior to the pandemic hitting. So I moved out here on my own, started a new job in January, and being in the Pacific Northwest, it kind of hit here first.
It's funny, as we were just chatting, and I said that I stole a term that I got when I chatted with you, which was this concept of PRE-TSD, not PTSD, but PRE-TSD. What did you mean by that?
So obviously, everybody was watching the news and seeing the pandemic spreading, and, we're a global society, so we knew it was coming to us, and everyone was just kind of waiting to see when it was going to hit. And we had the first cases out here, and I guess it started in Washington. We started seeing things. My first exposure was March 19th. And as we started seeing patients trickle in with this, we're realizing we still don't have policies set up to protect us. We don't have the right equipment to protect us. And there was that increasing, just exponentially increasing anxiety of when is the shoe going to drop? Yeah. And it was just this all-consuming, you're at work and you're scared about it. Is this patient with a cough? Is this COVID? We didn't know what it looked like. We didn't know the transmission yet. We didn't know how to treat it. We didn't have any testing for it. So just the overwhelming sense of anxiety, and you just couldn't pinpoint it. You couldn't understand why you were feeling this way because it wasn't that bad yet. You were seeing the patients, but it wasn't what you were seeing on the news of what was happening in Italy where people are dying, you're running out of vents. So we just couldn't pinpoint that overwhelming anxiety that we were feeling. Somebody pointed out pre-traumatic stress disorder. You know that the trauma is coming. You just don't know when.
That's such a powerful term because it really captures, in my experience, what people, were talking about. And also it's really interesting as we talk with people from all over the country in different areas when the pandemic hit, because I was in Connecticut, and from Connecticut, Washington seems really far away. I remember that. It was in the United States, but it was far away. But you were right next door. So you both experienced the same sense of not being prepared, but you were like right there. what was your experience of when you actually started to see the virus?
It was still just a lot of the anxiety of not being prepared for it. Like I said, my first exposure was March 19th. We didn't have enough policies in place to be able to separate potential COVID patients from non-COVID patients. We didn't have testing at that point. For the entire state of Oregon, if I remember correctly, we had 40 tests per day for the entire state.
For the entire state.
Yeah. And everybody had to send their tests over to Salem. And there was one testing center, and they ran the sickest first. So we were seeing people that we weren't able to test, and we're wondering, were they going to fit into, are these the sickest first? And we had a couple of cases, young people, 29-year-old, otherwise healthy person, a 30-something-year-old that had flu-like symptoms for 48 hours and then came in coding. And you're sitting there wondering, I've now been exposed to this person. Are they even going to be tested? And kind of as crude as it is, does being dead make you more or less sick? Is that higher priority or lower priority on being tested?
For the testing, interesting.
Right. And we've been exposed to the aerosolization of intubating a person and doing chest compressions, and it's just that constant worry of, have I been exposed? Or when a patient came back positive, now I know I've been exposed. Am I going to get sick? Are my friends going to get sick? Am I going to pass this along to somebody else? Even if you had a COVID positive patient, we didn't have enough staff to say, well, this is your only patient for the day. You still have to go see other patients. And it was a huge fear of ours that, knowing we were being underprotected, are we putting other people at risk?
Other people meaning?
Other patients.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of unknowns in the beginning. And sometimes if you weren't able to test, it seemed like something different was coming in, some different kind of virus.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The way you described it, it sounded like it could be pretty sudden.
That's what we were seeing at first. We were definitely seeing people with not very long with symptoms. They'd have flu-like symptoms for 24 hours, 48 hours, and then all of a sudden their oxygen saturations were just plummeting. Or they would have this hacking cough that they couldn't catch their breath. We were just seeing strange things, like strange presentations that we couldn't pinpoint. So of course, we would all worry that was COVID. We still didn't understand the extent to which the symptoms would present.
So how did you and your colleagues approach it? I mean, how did you come together to figure out what to do?
So even before it hit us, knowing that it was inevitably coming to us, we tried to fight for a plan. We tried to figure out a way to separate COVID from non-COVID patients in an effort to efficiently treat these patients while keeping ourselves and everyone else safe. But it felt like everything that we came up with was met with just pushback from management. And early on, we didn't have any PPE. They're just nationwide. There wasn't PPE to be had. So we knew we weren't adequately protected. We were using single-use PPE, having to wipe down gowns with bleach wipes and then pulling them over our heads so that we could reuse it again. And even to the point where we were, having to use hand sanitizer on gloves to try to reuse gloves. And in many situations, we were just trying to find whatever we could on our own. I had family and friends just sending used N95 masks or respirator masks for, home projects, things that they had lying around the house or in their garage somewhere, like sending them cross country to me just because that was more reliable protection than what the hospital was providing. And we just had to rely a lot on community and each other because our leadership at many levels was failing us. We knew we were being gaslighted. We kept being told that we were safe from people that refused to even come into the unit. People that were working from home now were telling us how safe we were. And, we're educated professionals. We know that we're not being protected. And we're realizing that these regulations weren't there to keep us safe. They were there based on keeping us working. So
it felt like you were way out into, I was going to say enemy territory, but like across the line, like you're over in the field of battle, but the support didn't feel like they were there. or when you say gaslighting, this idea of like, it's already confusing enough, but it's hard to know what to believe even from leadership.
Right. We already didn't feel safe, and we were begging for policies that made us feel safer. We were begging for better protection. And 10 months into this, we still don't have it. But in those early days, I think the anxiety just took over, and there were starting to be discussions as far as who should be the ones to take care of these patients.
What was that like? I think there was a divide, the people that had families maybe, or,
right.
And those that didn't. Like, what was that like?
I think it was, fear-based, and it's understandable. Like I said, we didn't understand the transmission. We didn't understand how contagious this was. You're seeing pictures of healthcare workers in Italy and China and all across the world that are in full hazmat. And we had a mask and a rinky-dink gown. And we know that we're nowhere near as protected as these other countries. Obviously you don't want to get sick. You don't want your loved ones getting sick. So it's understandable that you're having these fear-based reactions. But some people were starting to say, well, I have small kids at home. I shouldn't be part of the COVID unit, or I shouldn't have to deal with respiratory patients. And then it started becoming a push of, well, you're single. You don't have kids. You should go in. And it's like, all right, well, I'm single and I don't have kids, but I still think my life is valuable. Like, I don't want to get sick. And there was kind of that discrepancy of being exposed at a disproportionate amount, because it was, well, you've already been exposed, so you might as well keep taking them. Or you don't have a family at home, so it's not like you're going to transmit this to anyone.
Wow. What was that like? So you could hear that as like people in a crisis trying to figure out some kind of ethics about how to send people to the front lines, but it depends on what side of the divide you're on. And it sounded like you were on the side of the single and no kids side. What was that like for you?
It was isolating. It kind of made you feel like, is the view that my life is less valuable because I don't have a family at home, but then there's that fear of the higher the viral load, the more you're exposed, the higher the potential that you could actually contract it. So yeah, it was just more stressful, and it kind of made you feel more alone and more isolated, because that whole aspect of going home to no family, my entire support system is across the country. I moved out here for this job, and I didn't have somebody to come home to that was a support system. I couldn't go out and do any other kind of activities that would relieve the stress, go out hiking, go out shopping, go out anything. It was very isolating.
So I think that's one of the things that it's important that you're giving voice to. I think people don't walk around necessarily knowing what their frontline healthcare workers are carrying, into the field of battle, so to speak. I mean, obviously you're in this work because you love it and because you're good at it and because you want to help people and you're passionate. And when you signed up for the job, you knew what the stresses would be, and you're in the emergency room. I'm sure you've seen a lot of suffering and death and things that people don't normally see in their lives, right? In their day-to-day work lives. But what you're speaking to in and above that, when you were or still are out there saving lives, taking care of people that come in because they're sick, there's an extra layer of stuff. Even just this last thing you said about feeling like, I don't want to use the word expendable, but necessarily.
Oh, absolutely.
But that's not usually a feeling people expect to have in the normal course of work. Maybe in an actual war battle, they might. But you were just saying also something about, in normal times, you would be able to deal with your stress. You have ways of dealing with your stress, but those weren't available to you.
Right. That term expendable has been used a lot, along with disposable or sacrificial. I've heard these terms echoed by so many people that I've worked with or spoken to all across the country, just to explain how we're feeling. Even the term healthcare heroes that people were using a lot, it feels tainted. And, don't get me wrong, I have so much immense respect and appreciation for everyone that's going through what we're going through and works under these conditions and still continues to show up. As much as I've never been more scared or stressed to go to work, I've also never been more proud to be part of such an amazing group of people. But I feel like there's another side to it. Like, calling us heroes is almost an excuse or a way to justify how many of us are going to get sick or die. Like, our death toll is some kind of noble wartime sacrifice instead of something that should be avoidable if we're given the appropriate resources and protection to do our job. And then when we shine light on these conditions, we're told that we signed up for this. And, we want to take care of our patients. We didn't sign up to be underprotected. Proper protection is drilled into you from day one. And the first step of all emergency training is to ensure the scene is safe. And we know we're not safe, but we're still being expected to perform our job with what's becoming more and more sick patients and fewer resources and now fewer staff.
Really interesting what you said about hero, because, I can imagine lots of people wanting to use that word with the best of intentions. And even back in normal times, I'm sure you didn't do this work to be called a hero. You don't do it for that. You do it because you love the work. But now it's even more kind of, it doesn't fit with your experience. And it sounded like you're saying, it's not just words that you use, but when you're talking with your colleagues locally and across the country, there are new words that have come into the lexicon of frontline healthcare workers, the expendable, sacrificial, like almost if we did a word cloud for all the frontline workers, you think we would actually see there's people using those words?
Oh, absolutely. At this point, especially, we're so exhausted. This has been every day for us. And we're still not, like I said, sure, some places have it different. I know in my personal experience, we are still fighting every day. I have been fighting every single day for the past 3 weeks with the committee, trying to get us the proper policies, procedures, and PPE for this coming surge. We're already seeing the numbers rising again, and we still don't have what we need. And this is now December 1st. We've been doing this too long. We haven't had a break. We haven't had a chance to come up for air, and people are over it. So that support is gone now, that community support where people wanted to honk their horns and wait outside the ER and clap for us at 7:00. That was very much appreciated. That show of support was so appreciated. However, all we're asking is just stay home, wear your mask, wash your hands, and people are over it.
Why do you think that is? Because people read the paper and they see that the numbers are, in some cases, just as high or higher. Why do you think people are done with it?
I think everybody just wants to return to their normal lives. And I don't think anybody can relate to that more than those of us that have been dealing with it day in and day out. Mm-hmm. We deal with it in our work lives. We deal with it in our personal lives. We understand we want this to be over also. We want to be done with this. We're so exhausted. And I think people just figure, okay, well, it was fine to quarantine. Everybody took their little mask selfies and we quarantined at home and we made it into this fun thing. It's not fun anymore. Mm-hmm. We want to go back out. We want to see our friends. We want to see our family. We miss that sense of normalcy. And I think people just think, well, now I'm willing to take extra chances and extra risks just to have some sense of normalcy, instead of actually trying to get rid of this thing.
And you don't have the luxury of being done with it in your work.
Exactly.
Because for those of us that are not on the front lines and it's not right in front of you, it's different. And a number of people talk about the frustration, or sometimes they use the word anger, about the difference between what you see with your eyes, on the front lines, and then people's behavior, like you're kind of talking about. Have you, both people people you don't know, family, friends, what has your experience been in that regard?
I've definitely seen it both ways. I've had people that are incredibly supportive. My poor parents that have had to listen to all my stories, they have been quarantining since March. Mm. But I also have family and friends that have listened to what my coworkers and I have been going through. And, obviously some people want to say this is hyped up by the media and don't believe the news. But if this is coming from somebody that and I'm telling you everything that we're seeing and how in the entire careers of everybody that I've worked with, this is unprecedented. We don't scare easy in the ER. We see crazy things all day, every day, and we thrive on it. But this is something that has scared everyone that I've worked with.
Yeah.
And to hear that en masse, to have people still not take it seriously, I don't know what else we can do to get through to people. And it's extremely frustrating. I have family that still, the way that I phrased it was, they're not letting the fact that people are dying interfere with their parties.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually have people, and I know this is the case for a lot of my friends across the country, we'll have people come into the ER and yell at us for our policies because this is ridiculous that you're making me wear a mask. This whole thing is a hoax.
Really? Is out of the blue? They're not sick. They just walk by an emergency room and run in.
No. They'll be patients, but they'll be in for something else. And we make all of our patients wear a mask. And we have, different visitor policies now. So they'll get upset that they can't have their family members back or multiple family members back. And they'll get upset that we're making people wear a mask and they'll yell at us. Like, we get verbally abused on a daily basis by people that don't like the COVID policies at the hospital. And they yell at us saying that this is a hoax and that we're blowing this out of proportion. And meanwhile, we could have somebody intubated 2 doors down. They have no idea what we see. They have no idea what we've been through. And it's, at this point, it's a conscious choice not to see it.
Part of the absurdity or perversity of that, as I listen to you, Caitlyn, is people clearly have convictions, very strong convictions, and feel as though they're speaking from a position of authority in a way, and passion. And your authority on the topic comes from, you've earned it, right? I mean, you've earned it literally in the trenches for months. It's hard to beat that kind of authority. It's hard to argue with that. And yet there seems to be a missing piece that somehow there's a disconnect with, I don't know if you experienced that. I mean, have you been able to turn somebody around on this, to change their mind that was coming at you, speaking with passion on the other side, not taking it seriously, and you were able to kind of turn them around?
To a certain extent. I'm not going to say it's 100% effective, but I had people that are not in the medical field, family, friends, acquaintances, that reached out to let me know the truth about COVID. That, from the comfort of their quarantine on their couch, wow, they're going to tell me the truth about COVID and what it's really about, the conspiracies behind it, how it's not real, how what I'm seeing and what I'm experiencing isn't happening. And most people, I'd say, were somewhat receptive to, look, it's still, especially early on, we don't know what's happening. But what I can tell you is we're seeing symptoms we've never seen before. We're seeing these unprecedented presentations. We don't know what's going on. We don't know how to treat it, but this is what we're seeing. It's consistent with what they were seeing around the world. Some people you're able to turn around. Some people are just, they hunker down harder into their convictions that this is a hoax.
How do you deal with that? Are you able to at least laugh at it a little bit? Are you and your colleagues, or?
I'd say the inappropriate humor and the just having to laugh at this is our only saving grace.
I don't know what the word is. It brave enough or willing to be really for the team, to do that for the team, especially back in that first surge, what kept you going? Like, how did you get through it?
I think a lot of it was just having each other, our team. Because as I've mentioned, I was out here by myself. I did not handle it well at first. The amount of stress, I felt like I was either at work dealing with it, or I was at home just trying to consume as much as I could about it. I was watching the news. I was looking up articles. I was trying to find everything that I could find so that I'd be prepared for the next time I was at work. And then there was almost this anxiety if I had a couple of days off. Well, what's changing? What am I going to walk back into at work? And, things were changing day to day, sometimes shift to shift, as far as policies, procedures, and the census of patients, how acute the patients were. So it was kind of a strange mix of, you want to not be at work because it's so draining and it's so exhausting. But the longer that you're not at work, you're wondering, well, what's going on there? What am I going to be walking back into? It was almost easier to keep picking up extra shifts just so that you're aware of what's going on, just so that you're staying informed. And it was overwhelming to just have it constantly. You're either worrying about it at home and just trying to take in all this information, or you're dealing with it, and it's physically and mentally exhausting.
When you were just describing that, I was almost getting this visual of like a part of your brain that a lot of healthcare workers have, which makes you really good at what you do. You know, you're scientifically minded and curious, and you want to solve problems. If you see a problem that nobody's solving, you want to solve it. In your life, you've been able to take amazing care of people by using that part of your brain, right? By learning things that aren't easy to learn, and then applying them in the world. And so this new thing comes along that there's no roadmap for, there's no game plan. And so that part of your brain just starts going, you know, and it's trying to figure this thing out. Like you're saying, almost too much, like, you know, sort of detriment. Another thing that it does when you have that kind of a way of thinking is it makes you vulnerable to having something like this be traumatic. Do you know what I mean? Like, some people might not care, but to be a healthcare worker, you're used to solving problems, and all of a sudden, not only are you dealing with all the stuff you've talked about, you know, the exposure and all that you're seeing, but you can't figure it out.
And I think there's also an important part of what we go through as compartmentalization. At least for me personally, and other people that I've talked to in this, in the emergency room, you see trauma all the time. You know that you're walking into that. You know that anything could happen at any point. We see things on a daily basis that if somebody saw one event, they would potentially be traumatized for life. And this is our job. You know, we're exposed to this all the time, but we need to compartmentalize and have some sort of balance, some sort of release. And we weren't getting that. Mm-hmm. So there wasn't a chance to, okay, this is what we're dealing with at work. Now I'm going to go home and I'm going to relax. I'm going to process this and move on. There wasn't a chance to compartmentalize because you're at work and you're dealing with it. Now you're at home and you're researching it. You're thinking about it. You're wondering what's happening at work. You're wondering how bad it's going to be tomorrow. And there was no chance to come down from it. There was no chance to process it. And it was just getting exponentially more and more overwhelming because you didn't have that chance to just release and just relax.
This has only been part one of our conversation with Caitlyn, so please be sure to tune in to next week's episode to catch the rest of her experience with being on the front lines of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Lift the Mask. Voices of Heroes in a Silent Pandemic. With Dr. John Santopietro. Executive produced by Kevin M. Lynch, the Quell Foundation, and Mod Worldwide. Managing producer Sarah Marshall. Theme song by Musical Smile. The show is engineered and edited by Scott Waz and Steve Campagna of Philadelphia Post. Assistant audio editor Vlad Radu. Film editor at Mod Worldwide. Voiceover artist Sinead Doyle. Research and development by Colleen Lowe, Nick Lee, Jessica Ripper, and Caitlin Spurlock. Special thanks to Renee Wilk and Brittany McCormick as associate producers. Please rate and review this show on Apple Podcasts, and you might hear your review on a future episode. Got a question? Email the Quell Foundation at liftthemask@thequellfoundation.org for sponsorship information or to find out how you can share your story as a guest on a future episode. If you haven't already, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever great podcasts are downloaded. Also, please remember to share this podcast with friends and family who would enjoy this content. This is not a podcast for personal disclosure of suicidal thoughts or behaviors and is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional. If you are in crisis, please call 911 or go to your nearest emergency department for assistance. Call 1-800-273-TALK, that's 1-800-273-8255, or text HELP to 741-741 if you're thinking about suicide. The Quell Foundation is a registered 501c3 not-for-profit organization benefiting the over 62 million Americans living with a mental health illness. Tax ID 47-512-7883. The pandemic has hit us hard, and healthcare workers are our first and last lines of defense. So while they're looking out for us, who's looking out for them? There has never been a more critical time to address the mental health of our healthcare community. This is Lift the Mask, Voices of Heroes in the Silent Pandemic. Join the Quell Foundation and Hartford Health's Dr. John Santopietro as we provide a podcast for healthcare workers discussing their psychological traumas associated with continual exposure to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Hello, my name is John Santopietro. I'm a psychiatrist and I am the physician-in-chief at the Behavioral Health Network of Hartford Healthcare, headquartered in Hartford, Connecticut. During the pandemic, I have been part of a team providing support to healthcare workers on the front lines, and I have a particular interest in making sure that their stories get told. The Quell Foundation has put together this podcast in order to lift up the voices of those on the front lines as a way of reaching those who are still out there in the hope that they will be inspired to reach out for the help and support that is there for them. While there's been a lot of reporting about the pandemic in the news and even about the front lines of healthcare, what's unique about this podcast is that you get to hear the stories from the people that lived it and actually are still living it. I would also encourage other leaders to listen into this podcast because there are many lessons and clues about what makes good leadership in a pandemic and a crisis. It is my pleasure to welcome you to Lift the Mask, Voices of Heroes in the Silent Pandemic. So, welcome back, everybody, and welcome back, Caitlyn. We actually ended the last podcast, Caitlyn, midway through your story. We decided we actually wanted to have two podcasts because there was so much really rich material. If you don't mind telling us a little bit again about where you were and what your role was at the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah, so I've been an ER nurse for 10 years, 5 of which were spent as a traveling ER nurse across the country in about 11 different ERs. I had just moved out to the Pacific Northwest in January, and the pandemic kind of was first identified in the US over here in Washington State. So I guess I initially said on the first podcast that my first exposure was March 19th, but in talking with a friend, it was actually February 19th. I think everything kind of just ran together this year. But yeah, I guess I didn't realize that February 19th is when I started seeing my first COVID patients.
Well, thank you again for introducing yourself, and thank you for making that clarification. So let's pick up where we left off last time when you were talking about how you had reached a kind of a breaking point at some point and just what that was like.
I guess it was 3 months into it. It was already to a point where I wasn't doing well. Like I said, was working all the time, or I was just all consumed by trying to figure it out and trying to figure out what was the latest practice. I wasn't sleeping well. I was picking up a whole bunch of extra shifts because it was easier to be at work than home just stressing about it. So I was exhausted physically, mentally, emotionally, and already could kind of tell that I just wasn't handling it well. I didn't have my support system. It took us a while to realize that all of us that were already working together and exposed together were exposed to the same things, so we could kind of get together and hang out and vent and decompress. So before we realized that, I was either at work or I was at home in my apartment by myself. I wouldn't even go grocery shopping for fear of transmitting it to somebody else.
Somebody else.
I felt like I was a danger to other people, or that at least concerned that I could be a danger to other people. It was just very isolating that I was home by myself all the time or at work, just getting too overwhelmed. And finally, I had this case at work that was by far the worst case in my career. And everybody that was in the room that day kind of agrees that, you know, despite being in medicine for decades, that was one of the, if not the worst cases of their career. And basically it was a young woman that was scheduled to have a C-section the next day for a completely normal, typical, healthy pregnancy, and just all of a sudden became unresponsive. So she came into us and wasn't breathing. We had to initiate a code. We had to try to resuscitate her. When the OBGYN took an ultrasound of the baby was severely bradycardic, which meant that she wasn't oxygenating and could potentially not survive. We had to do an emergency C-section in the ER. We're not a trauma center. We're not prepared for that. We don't have the equipment for that. But there was an emergency C-section. They got the baby out. The baby was not well, also had to be resuscitated. So now we're dealing with an active resuscitation of the mother while the C-section is in progress, trying to save mom, trying to save baby. Just a high stress situation. We went through 16 units of blood products. You know, I don't want to be too graphic, but it was quite a scene. And unfortunately, both mom and baby did not make it despite our efforts. The saving grace is we know that we did absolutely everything correctly. So luckily we don't have to deal with that guilt of, could I have done something better? We had a extensive debrief about the case, but it's just clinically, it's interesting. Clinically, you go in there and it's very much, if this is the situation, this is what you do. You go on autopilot and the scientific aspect of it is, you know what's wrong, you know how to fix it, and let's see if it works. But the human aspect of it is another thing. And I think that was kind of my breaking point. Was I was already at my emotional capacity, and you have the whole team trying to save mom, the whole team trying to save baby, and losing both of them after working and giving it everything you've got for so long. I think the letdown of that and the realization of that, that's just kind of what broke me. It would have been in a traumatic case anyway, but the fact that it happened at the height of all this stress of the pandemic just set me over the edge.
You know, it's such a powerful story, Caitlyn. And, you know, in addition to it being not just you, but a number of people's worst case ever, you know, as I was listening to you just now, I was thinking, you know, the other elements of it, like you said, just the staggering human tragedy of it. And also that it's so senseless, right? Sort of, it's a senseless loss. And also this feeling that you were powerless, you know, even doing everything that you'd done, you know, this sort of sense of being powerless. When you say it's your breaking point, like what happened after that?
I didn't sleep for 3 days straight, not even a minute. I could not sleep. My anxiety was through the roof. I couldn't shut my brain off. There were so many visuals, and I couldn't stop it. And I couldn't stop myself from thinking, you know, I would go through the case over and over and just make sure that we didn't miss anything. And that's where the debrief comes in, and it was super helpful. And even in the immense grief that they were going through, the family even came back and thanked us and said that they knew we did everything we could, which was extremely powerful and obviously took a lot off of us as well.
Yeah. What a totally opposite reaction than what you were saying about COVID, where people were sort of senselessly interacting with you. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't stop having those visuals in my head of just kind of the worst parts of that event.
So let me ask you, because you talked about this incredibly powerful moment, right? And actually to use the word breaking point is really useful, right? And I've wondered, have people, maybe I wish kind of more people had reached a kind of point where they would then say, something's going on here, So when you reached that point, what did you do? Did you reach out? And what was that like?
Like I said, I spent 3 days where I didn't sleep at all.
Yeah.
I actually had to work the next day. My manager called me right before work, and I wasn't doing well. I was able to hold myself together. This happened right at the start of the shift. I was able to hold myself together throughout the shift and completely lost it on my way home. Called up my mom, of course. You need your mom.
Sure.
Called up my mom and just kind of was just, I couldn't speak. I was trying to get across what happened and just words weren't even coming out. Nothing intelligible, at least. My boss called me right before work when I had finally just gotten myself together and told me I didn't have to come in if I didn't think I could come in. And I decided, I wanted to power through. I was going to do this. It was, a princess shift, as they said. It was only a couple hours. Mm-hmm. And even just being at work, there were a couple of us that worked that night, the previous night, that were involved in the case, found each other at first because we all knew that we weren't doing well with it. And none of us had slept that night. But of course, anytime there's an interesting case at work, everybody wants to talk about it. Mm-hmm. So everybody would come up and want to know the details about it. And they weren't there, so they don't have necessarily the human aspect of it. So they want to know the clinical aspect of it. Mm-hmm. And is this true that this happened? And oh my God, I can't believe that happened. And just constantly bringing it up when you're trying to shove it back down so you can get through your day. I'm not somebody that cries easily, but it was to the point where I was just sitting there like looking at one of my friends that was involved in the case, and I have tears streaming down my face. I was like, what is happening?
Wow.
Something broke me. It was after that I just realized, like, I don't know how to get over this. I don't know how to process it. I actually reached out to see if I could find some mental health help. And I was paired up with a counselor that when she asked me what my goals were, I said, first and foremost, I need to figure out how to process this because it's not working. Anything that I know how to do isn't working. I have too much built up trauma after trauma of, the COVID cases and then this. And there were too many visuals going through my head that I couldn't get out. Pulling people from a car, knowing that this is the last time they're going to see their family member. If somebody can't breathe and you're having to pull them from a car and you're knowing they're not doing well. Yeah. But with the visitor policies, you can't bring the family back. So this is their last memory together is a stranger pulling your loved one out of the car. And having certain visuals that I couldn't get out of my head, I couldn't figure out how to make that stop. The one thing that really helped me was I'm somebody who enjoys writing anyway, and she suggested journaling.
Oh, really?
And the journaling actually forced me to identify what I was feeling. If I could actually write down and process as I was writing what I was seeing, what I was feeling, I could actually put a name to the feelings, and it helped me process it better. If I was actually writing out the whole case, for some reason, it just helped me, I don't want to say get over it, but just kind of recognize the emotions that were attached to it and just let it go and move on from there.
What really strikes me about that, Caitlyn, as somebody that's in the business, right? I'm in the mental health business, is that you didn't miss a beat when that therapist said, what do you want to work on? Before, like you said, you didn't have the words, but when you talked to that person, you immediately came up with a plan. You stated the problem. I have this accumulation of material, like psychological material traumatic stuff that's built up and I can't process it. I need to learn the skills, how to process it. And then you were able to pretty quickly find something that gave you a sense of forward movement and control. And so it sounds like it was a positive experience.
Yeah, no, it's something that I still continue to do now, especially with the resurgence of cases. We're having this new wave that's day after day, we're breaking records of new cases and deaths. So we're having that anxiety again. And I started to realize I would physically feel the anxiety coming on my way to work, or hearing these stories of the cases coming back and sitting here wondering, if this happens again, can I handle this? Can I go through this again? And at least now I have that hindsight of, or I guess the perspective of, it got this bad before, but now I can recognize what made it bad and make a conscious effort to kind of stop myself before I get too overwhelmed. So now that I have those tools, it makes it a little bit easier when I recognize this stress and this anxiety of, well, what's going to happen? Yeah. We're starting to see these cases. We're already running out of beds. And right now we're having this countdown of 7 to 10 days after Thanksgiving, when everybody has gotten together with their families now, what is our ER going to look like? And we're seeing the cases climb every day. We're running out of beds. The anxiety is obviously high, but I'm still utilizing those same techniques where I'm writing it down. And I can say, okay, well, if it gets this bad again, I handled it the first time. Yeah. I can handle anything I have to.
It's so important. You've just basically done a better job than I could do in explaining what therapy is. It's kind of mysterious, confusing. And we in the field don't do a great job explaining it, by the way, a lot of the time. But you just gave really eloquent description of what it's like. You come in, you say, this is my problem. And then you say, I want help building the skills to deal with it. And then you do it. You got to do the work, which you did. I think that's actually going to be really helpful for people listening to this to hear from your mouth, right? Not mine. What also I think would be helpful is to go back, because I think there are a lot of people out there that are maybe about to reach out, but they don't. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what it was that made you decide to reach out? Had you done it before? Did you know somebody that had a good experience? Did you debate it? Did you ask for advice?
I did debate it. My concern was I didn't want to reach out for help within the same hospital system that I was working. I didn't want to be seen as weak. I didn't want to be seen as crazy for being overwhelmed by my feelings or for not being able to handle them. So I did debate. I started talking to other friends, and especially after that last case, that big case that we had, I talked to my friends that were also involved in it and realized we're all going through the same thing. We're all having the same problems. None of us slept that first night. I didn't sleep for 3 days, and I was feeling absolutely crazy. I think just realizing that other people were going through it as well. And also, I understand the importance of getting help for your mental health.
Did your friends reach out too?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There was one friend that wasn't involved in the case, but she was working that night and she held down the fort. She was fantastic, along with, a couple other staff members that didn't have to get pulled into this. Yeah. They handled the entire rest of the department. She saw the state that we were in that night, and she saw the state of the room, and she knew the case. And she made it a point to take me out and just sit me down and ask me how I was doing, knowing that it was not well, but just taking that time to actually delve into, but really, are you okay? And just making it known that it's okay to not be okay. Wow. And it's okay to need help. And knowing that I had that support when I was out here feeling like I had nobody. Yeah. Because, I was new to the area. I don't have my support people in the time when you really need your support people. So I think having that support from my coworkers, and also just knowing that it's important to take care of your mental health, and knowing that I was not okay, all that accumulated and just had me feel like it was time to reach out.
So what would you say to someone, let's say all the way across the country that's a emergency room nurse and they've been through something sort of like that, and they say to you, I had the thought, but I feel like it's a sign of weakness to reach out. What would you say to them?
I'd say especially in the ER, we see things that are not normal. And I think sometimes we forget because it becomes our normal that this stuff is not normal for a person to process. And even under non-COVID times, we have that time where you take what happens at work and you have some kind of release outside of work to sit and process and not just be continually compounded by what we're going through. And especially right now, we don't have that luxury. We're just continually compounded by the traumas of work. And I don't think it's a sign of weakness. I think it's just a sign of self-care. And now more than ever, we need to take care of ourselves. We need to take care of each other. We're all really recognizing that healthcare workers are going through a lot that nobody else can understand right now. We have this special role in this pandemic that we don't get a break from it. We have no choice. We didn't ask for these conditions, and we have no choice but to show up because our roles are critical in fighting this. I know I personally have developed a stronger respect and appreciation for my colleagues, people I know, people I don't know. Just if you're doing this, I have so much respect for what you're going through because I know that we're all going through something that nobody else can understand. And I think it's just so important to make sure that you take care of yourself and make sure that you take care of each other. And if you see somebody that is struggling, maybe they're contemplating getting mental health help. Mm-hmm. And maybe you can be that person to say, it's okay. I support you. I support that you need to take this action to learn better coping skills. I don't think it's a sign of weakness. I think it's just trying to figure out what works best for you to process this unprecedented trauma that we're going through.
That's really helpful, by the way. And it's like you just said a minute ago, it's okay to say that you're not okay. So I just want to, first of all, tell you that I'm really thankful, grateful that I had the chance to talk with you. I have no doubt that your time with us on the podcast is going to really be extremely helpful to some people out there. In addition to picking up some of your terms, which I'm going to use, I love the PRE-TSD, but just to hear, you give voice to the experience of not just the accumulation of trauma in and above what you would normally sign up to do, but what you have to deal with in the world around you relative to whether people understand that or not, and all that you're kind of going into battle carrying all this extra weight. I thought that was really powerful. So I just want to really thank you and wish you well. I know you're you're there doing the work because it's important to you. The work is, and helping people is, and we wish you the best.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for what you guys are doing, because I really think this would help a lot of people.
Lift the Mask. Voices of Heroes in a Silent Pandemic. With Dr. John Santopietro. Executive produced by Kevin M. Lynch, the Quell Foundation, and Mod Worldwide. Managing producer Sarah Marshall. Theme song by Musical Smile. The show is engineered and edited by Scott Waz and Steve Campagna of Philadelphia Post. Assistant audio editor Vlad Radu. Film editor at Mod Worldwide. Voiceover artist Sinead Doyle. Research and development by Colleen Lowe, Nick Lee, Jessica Ripper, and Caitlyn Spurlock. Special thanks to Renee Wilk and Brittany McCormick as associate producers. Please rate and review this show on Apple Podcasts, and you might hear your review on a future episode. Got a question? Email the Quell Foundation at liftthemask@thequellfoundation.org for sponsorship information or to find out how you can share your story as a guest on a future episode. If you haven't already, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever great podcasts are downloaded. Also, please remember to share this podcast with friends and family who would enjoy this content. This is not a podcast for personal disclosure of suicidal thoughts or behaviors. and is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional. If you are in crisis, please call 911 or go to your nearest emergency department for assistance. Call 1-800-273-TALK, that's 1-800-273-8255, or text HELP to 741-741 if you're thinking about suicide. The Quell Foundation is a registered 501c3 not-for-profit organization benefiting the over 62 million Americans living with a mental health illness. Tax ID 47-512-7883.